Welcome back to the Arbitress YouTube channel. Today's class will be learning how to make this beautiful plunging neckline bustier blouse. Okay, so you can see the V shape that we have here. We're going to be learning how to achieve this perfect V so that our yoke will come out neater and finer henceforth. If this is what you like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this tutorial. Thank you. So to make this pattern, I already drafted my bust here and I'm using my waist and bust that like this. I'm sure by now we'll understand what I mean by that. And then for my shoulder that, I just divided what I have on my shoulder into two, then I connected it back to my bust point. So now the first thing I'll do now is to close this bust that now and transfer it to the shoulder. So before I do that, I will need to open up my shoulder that like this. Then after opening my shoulder that, I'm going to cut open this bust that now, and then I'm going to close this. Okay, you can see that the dart here now has been transferred to the shoulder. Okay, then I'll hold it with my masking tape. Okay, so this have been closed now. The next thing now is to draft my plunging neckline. So you can actually decide to trace this on another fresh paper, or you can just put a paper underneath it so that it will be easier for you. So I think I'll just trace it on the first paper so that all these markings will not be showing too much. So I just placed my pattern on it now, and then I traced this out using my pencil. So this is what I have. I hope you can see it, but I'm just going to darken it with a marker so that it can be more obvious for us to see. So after doing this now, we're going to draft out the plunging neckline. Okay, so I just extended it here because remember, by the time I close it, I may have a shortage. So that was why I did this, so that will give me enough room to cater for whatever shortage that I may have. Because remember, we're going to be using a net, a two net for the illusion part, and we are not going to be adding any dart for the net. So I'm going to be closing the dart that we have there. So in order not to have any shortage, that was why I did that extension. Okay, so this is what we have now. The next thing is for us to determine the extent of our yoke. So like we said earlier, this yoke is going to be a plunging neckline, which means that the yoke is going to go deep. So we'll be using a different method because people normally have challenges while sewing this type of yoke. So for you to get something really nice at this point and something sharp, we'll be using the method of opening it on the center front so that we can have enough opportunity to manipulate this while we are sewing it. So to do this now, for me to know the depth of my yoke, I'm going to be using the difference between my under bust and my bust point to get like a small circle so that it will guide me on where I'm going to be placing my yoke. So I'm going to be doing this. The difference is actually 3.5, so I'm going to be doing this using this method. So now from my bust point, I'm measuring the 3.5 all round like this. So you should actually consider using maybe a pencil, but I'm using this so that you can see what I'm doing well. Okay, so I have it like that. Then on this side also, I'm going to be marking my 3.5 inches all through. Okay, so I have the 3.5 inches like this also. Okay, so this is actually okay for me, and I'm going to be using this as a guide to draw out the plunging neckline. So the first thing I'm going to do now is to look for a curve now, and then blend this side to my armhole area. Okay, so and like I said, I have this to guide me, so I'm just going to try and look for something really smooth. I can just connect two of these points now, so I have something I like. So from here now, I'm going to connect this to my armhole and then I'll blend it in. Okay, so this side is done. So the next thing is to connect this. So it depends on where you want this to stop. So you can decide to go all the way down, or you can just stop on your, if you stop on your bust point, it's not going to be really deep like that. So I think I'm just going to be stopping this on the under bust, and this is my actual under bust line. Okay, so I'll be stopping my yoke on this under bust. And to do this, I'm just going to be using this as a guide. Then I'll place it here now, and then look for, and I have my points here already, so I'm just going to look for a nice curve there, and then I'll connect it to my under bust. So from here now, I'm connecting it like this, and then you can see that our yoke is quite deep. So that is what we have, and you don't have to go with this. Like I said, you can decide to make it deeper than this, but it's still the same method. So now that I have this now, I'm going to try to cut this out so that we can transfer this to our fabric. So I'm cutting. I remember from the start we had a bust start here, which we transferred to our shoulder to have what we have there. Okay, so if you don't know how I was able to get that, just go through the channel. We've had different tutorials on how to draft a bust dart, so you may want to check that out. So this point here, remember that I said I just opened it, I just did this V so that I'll not have any shortage. So if you just want to be sure of what you are doing, you can just decide to open your waist dart here. Okay, so just open one of your waist darts, and then once you open it, I can easily close up this shoulder dart. Then I'll redraw it so that I'll be sure that I'm not going to be having any shortage. So you can see, closing my waist bust that my shoulder dart, you can see that my yoke just matched perfectly even without checking it, because I use exact same thing, which is the difference between my bust and my bust point and my under bust measurement, which is 3.5 inches. That was what I used in guiding me. So immediately I closed it, you can see that they just match each other perfectly. So now, since I have this now, I can redraw my armhole like this, and then I can easily cut this out. Okay, so this is cut out now, and then I'm going to be cutting out my yoke. Okay, so see what we have here. And like I said, it's going to be a net, so we are not going to be having any. Okay, so this is tearing. I'm just going to hold this with a pen. So I'm going to be noting this as my yoke, and we'll be cutting this using 2 nets. Okay, so I'll just hold this and close this dart completely, because you're not going to be having a dart on it. So you can see the shape that we have here. Assuming that I cut it out straight like this, I'm going to be having a shorter, but I actually don't need it actually, because I'm still going to close this dart. So now I just hold this with a tape so that it can stay in place for me. Then I'll completely cut out this dart that I have here. Then I'll move to my fabric and then cut them out using my fabric. So when I'm cutting my fabric, remember for the center front, we normally close up the dart for our center front, but in this case, because the central front is going to be in 2 pieces also, we are not going to be closing it up. We're just going to be cutting 2 separate pieces, and then I'll add some allowance to it because I'm going to sew them together. So this is my side front, this is my center front, and this is my yoke. So all my patterns are complete now. I'll just go ahead and cut them out on my fabric. Okay, so now I've cut it out on my fabric. As you can see, I did not add any allowance on my dart lines because I already have it there. The only allowance was on the center front. Remember I said the center front is going to be 2, so I have allowances there because I'm sewing it back. And then on the upper part where I'm going to be sewing my yoke back to my main bodice, I have allowance, and this is my yoke, so I added allowance on this lower part also where I'll be sewing it to the bodice. And then on the M line here, remember the pattern is just sharp, but for my net I decided not to make it sharp. I just went in by 1/2 inch to make it this flat. I hope you can see what I'm saying. So I went in by 1/2 inch here before I did the connection. So let me just place it here. I hope it's more visible like that. So now the next thing now is for us to go over to the machine now and start to sew this together. And also for the lining, I'm using the same fabric for the lining also. So I just cut my lining the same way I cut my main fabric, and here they are. So we're going to be sewing this now on the machine. Okay, so now we're on the machine now, and I'll start to sew it. So the first thing now is to join the bustier together like this. Okay, so before I remove it, to indicate where my yoke stops, I'm going to notch it. Remember, we stopped our yoke on the under bust, so I'm going to notch the under bust before I remove my pattern. So I'm notching it like this. Then the next thing is for me to remove the pins so that I can sew the bustier darts together. So after removing my pins now, I'm going to take this now and then sew. So I'm using a black color of thread so that we can see what I'm doing well. As you can see, I'm just taking it together. I'll put it under my machine and I'll sew with 1/2 inch. That's the allowance that I left. So here I'm just opening it and I'll continue sewing. So now after sewing it, I'm going to notch this now, and then I'll notch everything here. So when it is notched, this is what we'll have. Then you go ahead and press your seam open, and when you press your seam open and you open it out, this is what you will have. So now you can decide to pad this with whatever it is that you want. You can use a wadding or a bra cup. I already have a tutorial on how you can pad your bustier on the channel if you don't know how to. So I'll go ahead and sew the second one now before I put my yoke. And so this yoke now, you can decide to turn it with a bias on the neckline, or you can just cut 2 of this yoke now and then sew them together and use them to turn out each other. Okay, so this is the second one now, and then I'm going to sew it, and then after sewing it, I'm going to bring it out and then notch it the same way I did for the first one. So now the next thing, you sew your lining the same way we have sewn this also. You sew both linings together from on the bustier part. Go ahead and press your seams open. I'm just going to go ahead with this because of time. So you press your seam open so that they can lie flat, and then now you're going to bring your 2 patterns together. Okay, so this is the first one and this is the second one. So now the next thing is for me to bring in my yoke. So I'm just going to remove the pins on the pattern of the yoke, and then I'm going to place it how it's supposed to be. So now I have my yoke like this, and then I'm going to place it here. So now the notches that I made here is just going to guide me on where the yoke is supposed to start. And then remember, we added allowance there, so the yoke is just going to go like this, okay, and like this. So now to sew it, I'll first of all flip for this side now, and then I'm going to sew it. Remember, it's going to be easy for me because it's not so tiny here. I have 1/2 inch allowance, half inch on fold. So by the time I open it out, it became 1 inch, and the allowance that I left for this one is also 1/2 inch. So it's just going to match in perfectly and makes it easier for me to sew. So now I'm just going to place them together. Okay, so now I'm just placing it together now, using this notch as my reference point, and then I'll start to sew it. So before you sew, you can decide to pin it, especially if you're a beginner, so that it will not be too difficult for you to sew. So once you pin it, you just know the lines that you are sewing with. So I'm pinning this now, then after pinning it, I'll go ahead to sew it. Okay, so now I'm placing it underneath it, then I'll go ahead to sew it. using the 1/2 inch allowance that I left. So because I've pinned it, I'm just going to be removing my pins and then I'll be sewing along. So it's that simple. So you can see the seam line that we have there. So this is one of these very simple ways you can make your plunging neckline, and then it will still going to retain its sharpness that you want to achieve by the time you are done with this. Okay, so I'm just going to open my seam here. If you have actually pressed your seam open, you won't have this challenge. It would have opened up for you on its own. So I'm opening it manually now, and then I'll continue sewing it. So now I'm almost at the end point. I've sewn it and then I'll remove it, and this is what I have. Okay, so this is what it is looking like here now. The next thing is to sew the other one, and to sew the other one I'm just going to place them on each other like this, and then I'll start to sew it also. So now I'll place the first one on the second one. I'll start from the waist area, and then I'll sew. You can see the notches match. Okay, so we have a notch here which matches each other. So I'll continue to sew it, and then when I get to that point where I have my yoke, I'm going to push it aside now. You can see what I'm doing. Bring the camera closer, you can see how I'm sewing it from here. So here, this is why the yoke part starts. So I'll continue sewing it. I'll just make sure that they match each other, and then I'll continue sewing. So when I get to this point where the yoke starts, I'm going to try to shift this to the other side so that it's not going to affect it. You may want to notch it. You can bring it out and notch it a bit on that area so that it can completely open out for you. So once you notch it, you'll be able to push it, and then you're going to continue sewing it. Okay, so I've pushed this on that side now, and then I'll continue sewing my yoke just the way I did for the first one also. So now I'm just sewing the yoke, then I'll continue sewing it like that. So you can see that this method is quite easy for you to do. The only difference is just that you're going to be having a seam at your center front. That is the difference, but it doesn't affect the outfit, and it makes your deep, especially if you are working with a very plunging neckline, when the yoke is very deep, this makes the work easier for you to sew it, and then till I sew it completely. So I'll bring it out now, and this is what I'm going to have. So you can just see the V that, let me just push the seam allowance in a bit so that we can see it well. Okay, so see the sharp V that we have there. That is what you want to achieve by the time you are done with it. So for you to close this now, I'm going to be introducing my lining. So these are the two linings that I have for both sides. So it's supposed to cover it up like this, and then cover it up on this other side. So now to sew it, I'm just going to flip it now, and then I'll treat it independently. So I'll try to open this seam, or another thing you can do is to sew this up to your notch area. That's where that's where your yoke starts. So have a notch there. I'm just going to repeat the notch for the other one. Then you take it to your sewing machine now, and then sew it up to that notch before you actually turn with your lining. Okay, so I'm sewing the lining now. You can also do the yoke, the next part like this, but I think it's easier with that method. So once you stop here now, you can easily close it up like this, and then on the yoke part, I'm just going to flip it now, and then I'll match it up, and then I'll sew it like this. So you can also pin it if you want, and or if you know you can take it all at once, you can sew it once. So I'm pinning this together now. So I'm pinning it now. So as a guide for you, can see that the where you have your bustier, that the sewing there have to match each other. and then you continue to pin it. So after pinning it, I'm just going to sew it on this side using the seam line that I already have there as a guide. So I've pinned this. So I'm sorry this video is long, I just want us to get it because I already have so many requests on how we can sew our plunging neckline neatly. So now once I have it, I'll flip it to the other side, then I'll take it under the machine now, and then I'm going to sew it. So I'll just remove my pins as I go, and then I'm going to sew. So I'm just sewing on the seam line that I already have there, so there is nothing difficult here. I'm just following that seam line that I already have, and then the same thing that I've done here I'm going to do on the other side also. So I may not need to show the other side because it's just the same thing that I'm doing here. So now I've gotten to that point where I have my yoke, and then I'm going to stop sewing there. So now I've closed up one side of the yoke, and when I open it out, you will see that it's looking neat on this side. Okay, so you can see what we have here. You can see that our yoke has successfully been placed inside it, and this is what it's looking like on this side. So now the same thing we did here, I'm just going to flip this side also, and then I'll match it together. Now you can decide to pin it, or you can decide to go ahead and sew it straight, which is what I think I'll be doing. So I'm just going to match it up and then place it under the machine now, and then I'm going to sew. So it's that simple. You can see how simple it is to do this. So I'm just sewing following the seam line that I already have there. Okay, so you just take your time and then you sew. So like I was saying, you can see that the bustier part also match perfectly. So if you did it correctly, those notches should be your guide when you are sewing. It should guide you. So that is how you do this. Now I remove it when I'm done, and then we'll take it to the mannequin so that we'll see what we have. Okay, so we've done sewing this. Now you can decide to notch it, but you need to press this close. So this is what we have on the outer part, and this is what we have on the inner part. You can see how neat it is. So now the next thing is for me to take this to the mannequin so that we'll see what we have. And for the back part, you can just do any back you want, and we have the shoulder here. You can decide to put a yoke on the back also, or you just make the back full and then you just join it to your yoke, and you have your complete outfit. Okay, so this is our neckline. As you can see, it is deep, and you can be as deeper as you want. Like I said in the tutorial, you just need the same method to sew it, and you can see this place. See how sharp this place is. So you can see this method is quite simple to make, and it is very, very lovely. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, let us know in the comment section, and you should iron every step of the way. Okay, so I'm here to iron this because this is it. You can see all this rumpled line, but you should try as much as possible to iron. It makes your work neater and finer. So I'll see you in the next one. Bye.